The rain came down hard on St. Helena Medical Center's parking lot when Sarah Brennan ran through the employee exit at 11:47 p.m., her scrubs torn, hands shaking, 20 minutes before security would realize she was gone. She had a flash drive in her pocket containing evidence of medical experiments on terminal patients, 27 people used as test subjects without consent, their deaths covered up by falsified records. Across the wet asphalt sat 7 motorcycles. Their owners were inside visiting Tommy Reeves, a brother who'd been hit by a drunk driver. Sarah had been his ICU nurse. She knew these men. She knew their loyalty. She ran toward them like a woman with no other choice. When Marcus Wraith Kendall found her hiding between the bikes, terrified and bleeding, she whispered, "Please, hide me. They can't know I'm gone." By dawn, 72 bikers would arrive. By noon, a federal agent would have the evidence. By sunset, the people responsible would learn that some promises, the oath to protect the vulnerable, are worth any price. This is the story of a nurse who refused to stay silent, and the family she found on the other side of fear. Sarah pressed herself against the hospital wall, counting seconds. 16 minutes before someone checked the restricted wing. 16 minutes before they found the unlocked door and realized what she'd taken. The flash drive in her pocket felt like lead. She'd been Eleanor Voss's nurse 3 months ago. A 72-year-old woman with stage 4 cancer, no family, kind eyes. Eleanor had made Sarah promise to water the plants in her room even after she was gone. 2 weeks later, Eleanor coded. Sarah held her hand as she died. The next morning, Eleanor's body was gone. Not transferred, gone. Her chart showed discharge to hospice. But there was no hospice, no family contacted, no death certificate. Sarah started digging. She found 26 more, just like Eleanor, terminal patients, no visitors, all listed as discharged to facilities that didn't exist. Tonight, she'd found the truth. The experimental drugs, the forged consent forms, the wire transfers. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Marcus Hollis coordinating everything. She'd copied it all. Now security was looking for her. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment with where you're from. Your support means everything. Sarah's eyes found the motorcycles near the ER entrance. 7 Harleys, the Iron Sons MC. They'd been here every night visiting Tommy Reeves. Sarah had been his nurse. Good men, she'd thought. The kind who keep promises. She ran. Her sneakers slapped wet pavement as she sprinted across the lot, diving between 2 bikes, just as a flashlight beam swept past. She pressed flat against cold asphalt, holding her breath until the security guard moved on. "Ma'am!" Sarah looked up. A man stood over her, tall grey ponytail, leather vest reading Iron Sons MC, Marcus Wraith Kendall, Tommy's friend. "You're Tommy's nurse," Wraith said quietly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Wraith crouched down. "You running from someone?" She nodded again. "Did you hurt anybody?" "No. I'm trying to stop someone from getting hurt." Wraith studied her face, then pulled off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Stay low. Don't move." He walked inside. 90 seconds later, 6 more Iron Sons emerged. They formed a circle around Sarah, blocking camera views. "This is Sarah," Wraith said. "Tommy's nurse. She needs help." "No questions. Not yet." Sarah pulled out the flash drive. "They're experimenting on terminal patients, the ones with no family. 27 dead in 18 months. I have proof." Silence. Then Wraith nodded once. "Mount up." Within seconds, engines roared. Sarah climbed onto Wraith's bike as security vehicles started pursuit. But the Iron Sons knew these roads. Behind them, headlights followed. Ahead of them, safety. By morning, 72 riders would know her story. By noon, everything would change. The Iron Sons clubhouse sat 15 miles outside the city, down a gravel road through pine forest. By 6 a.m., 17 motorcycles filled the lot. Inside, the chapter gathered for church, the meeting where decisions that couldn't be unmade were voted on. Sarah sat in the corner wearing a borrowed jacket, watching as Cowboy, the chapter president, 70 years old, with a prosthetic hand, struck his gavel. "We've got a situation," Cowboy said. He gestured towards Sarah. "This is Sarah Brennan, nurse at St. Helena Medical. She discovered evidence of medical experiments on terminal patients without consent. 27 people dead or missing. She copied the evidence and ran. Security chased her. We brought her here." He paused. "Now we vote. Do we protect her? Help her expose this? Or stay out?" Wraith stood. "Tommy's alive because of Sarah. When his heart stopped, she brought him back. She didn't give up on him. That tells me who she is." A woman named Diesel spoke next. 27 people died alone, experimented on because nobody was watching. If we don't stand up for them, who will? Flint, a younger member with IT background, raised his hand. "I've reviewed her data. It's solid. Hospital's chief medical officer has connections to the DA and state medical board. This goes deep." Cowboy nodded. "Anyone opposed?" Silence. "Then it's unanimous. Sarah Brennan is under Iron Sun's protection." The room erupted in agreement. Sarah felt relief wash over her. She wasn't alone anymore. "We need names," Wraith said. "Dr. Marcus Hollis," Sarah replied, "Chief Medical Officer. He's coordinating everything." By 9 a.m., Flint was on the phone with Federal Agent Rachel Tomas, a woman whose brother had been saved by Iron Suns years earlier, who owed them a favor. By 11 a.m., Rachel agreed to meet them. By noon, the case would be officially opened. "We're outside St. Helena Hospital. If you've ever seen something wrong in healthcare and stayed silent, drop your city in the comments. You're not alone." Federal Agent Rachel Tomas sat in a corner booth at Maggie's truck stop at 11:47 a.m., watching Sarah Brennan walk in flanked by 6 Iron Suns members. Rachel had spent 17 years investigating healthcare fraud. Nobody called her with good news. "Agent Tomas?" Wraith approached first. "That's me. Thank you for what you did for my brother Danny. He's good people." Wraith gestured towards Sarah. "This is Sarah Brennan." Sarah slid into the booth. Up close, Rachel could see exhaustion in her eyes. "Ms. Brennan, I've reviewed your evidence," Rachel said. "It's compelling. But are you prepared for what comes next? Investigation, subpoenas, federal raids. Your name will be public. The hospital will come after you with everything they have." "What's the alternative?" Sarah asked. "Walk away, destroy the evidence, go back to work." "Can you do that?" Sarah asked. "Walk away from something like this?" Rachel studied her. "No, I can't." "Then neither can I." For 2 hours, Sarah walked Rachel through everything: patient names, medications, timelines, wire transfers. Rachel filled a notebook, recorded 90 minutes of testimony. "This is enough for a warrant," Rachel finally said. "By Wednesday, we'll have FBI agents inside St. Helena. By Friday, arrests." "What about me?" Sarah asked. "Protective custody until arrests are made, then grand jury testimony." Wraith leaned forward. "She won't be alone." Rachel looked at him. "Federal proceedings don't allow motorcycle club security. Doesn't matter. Where she goes, we go." Rachel almost smiled. "I believe you." She turned to Sarah. "You did the right thing. What you've done will save lives. Will it bring back Eleanor Voss? No, but it'll make sure her death meant something." As Rachel gathered her notes and left, Sarah's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "Sarah Brennan?" A man's voice. Calm, professional. "Dr. Marcus Hollis. I believe we need to talk." Sarah's blood went cold. Around her, the Iron Suns noticed immediately. "How did you get this number?" Sarah asked. "You're a hospital employee," Dr. Hollis said smoothly. "I'm calling because there's been a misunderstanding. What you think you've discovered is a research program approved at the highest levels. These patients consented to clinical trials. Eleanor Voss couldn't consent to anything. None of them could. Eleanor Voss chose to make her death meaningful," Hollis countered. "Sarah, you're in over your head. The people funding this research are multinational corporations with legal teams that could destroy your life. If you push this, you won't win. Is that a threat?" It's a reality check, but I'm offering you a way out. Come back to work. We'll call this a stress-related misunderstanding. You'll receive $250,000, tax-free. All you do is return the files and sign an NDA. It was more money than Sarah had ever seen, enough to disappear. And the patient's still alive? Sarah asked. We'll continue receiving treatment. Except they won't have families asking questions, because you chose patients nobody would miss. Sarah, I'm not taking your money. I'm not signing anything. Federal agents are already reviewing the evidence. By Wednesday, you'll be answering questions. By Friday, you'll be in handcuffs. Silence. Then Hollis spoke again, professionalism gone. You have no idea who you're up against. These people eliminate problems, and right now, you're a problem. Then they'll have to eliminate all of us, Sarah said, looking at the iron suns, because I'm not alone anymore. She ended the call. Wraith took the phone gently. Did he threaten you? Yes. Good. Wraith's expression was granite. Flint, send that recording to Agent Tomas. They mounted their bikes. As engines roared, Sarah wrapped her arms around Wraith's waist. Somewhere behind them, Hollis was making calls, deploying resources, but so were they. By midnight, Rachel would have a warrant request ready. By dawn, federal justice would begin moving. The safe house was a hunting cabin deep in state forest. Inside, the Iron Sons made security plans while Sarah sat by the fire. You should sleep, Wraith said eventually. I keep thinking about Eleanor, about how she died alone. She existed, Wraith said quietly. You remember her. You fought for her. Her name's going to be in federal documents, court records. She'll matter because you made her matter. Sarah felt tears burning. What if I fail? You won't, because you've got people who will stand with you even when it costs them. Hollis has money and lawyers, but all that disappears when someone doesn't fear him anymore. And Sarah, he met her eyes. We don't fear him. Sarah climbed into a bunk, still carrying 27 lives on her shoulders, but she wasn't carrying them alone. Wednesday morning arrived cold and grey. Sarah woke in the safe house at 5:32 a.m. to the sound of Wraith's phone buzzing. She'd barely slept. Every sound in the forest had jerked her awake. Every shadow through the window had looked like security guards coming for her. Wraith answered the call on the second ring. Tomas. He listened for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. Understood. Keep us posted. He looked at Sarah. It's happening. Federal agents are assembling now. They hit St. Helena at 6:45 a.m. with warrants for medical records, patient files, financial documents, and electronic communications. Sarah's hands trembled around her coffee mug. What if they don't find anything? What if Hollis destroyed the evidence? He didn't have time, Flint said from across the room, looking up from his laptop. I've been monitoring hospital server activity since Sunday night. Nobody's deleted files. Nobody's scrubbed databases. They don't think you actually took anything substantial. They think you're bluffing. That's arrogance, Diesel said, and arrogance always costs them. Wraith turned on the small television in the corner, local news. At 6:47 a.m., the breaking news banner appeared. Federal agents raid St. Helena Medical Center. Sarah watched, barely breathing, as news helicopters captured footage of black SUVs pulling up to the hospital entrance. Federal agents in windbreakers marked FBI and HHS OIG, Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, filed through the main doors carrying file boxes and electronic equipment. The news anchor's voice was professional but excited. We're receiving reports that approximately 25 federal agents have entered St. Helena Medical Center with warrants related to an ongoing healthcare fraud investigation. Hospital administrators have not yet commented, but sources tell us this raid was ordered by the U.S. Attorney's Office and involves allegations of medical experimentation without patient consent. They're actually doing it, Sarah whispered. Wraith sat beside her. Told you. Federal investigations don't play around. Once Rachel opened that case file, there was no stopping it. Hit that like button if you think justice is about to be served. This is where everything changes. The television coverage continued. At 7:15 a.m., cameras caught hospital security trying to prevent agents from accessing the restricted wing on the fourth floor. The same wing where Sarah had found the files. Federal agents simply presented their warrant and pushed through. Hospital administrators stood in the hallway looking stunned, powerless, watching their carefully constructed system crumble in real time. By 8:23 a.m., the news reported that agents had secured multiple areas of the hospital and were removing boxes of evidence. Sarah recognized the corridor they showed on screen, the one leading to the research storage facility in the basement. Her stomach twisted. They'd find the bodies there. The cremated remains stored in unmarked containers. The physical proof that patients hadn't been discharged at all. At 9:47 a.m., the cameras captured the moment everyone had been waiting for. Dr. Marcus Hollis emerged from the hospital's administrative entrance, flanked by 2 FBI agents. His hands were cuffed behind his back. His expensive suit looked rumpled. His face, usually composed, authoritative, was pale and tight with barely contained fury. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. "Dr. Hollis, did you authorize medical experiments on terminal patients? Dr. Hollis, how do you respond to allegations of falsified death certificates?" Hollis kept his eyes forward, jaw clenched, saying nothing as agents guided him into a waiting vehicle. Sarah felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite relief, not quite vindication. Something heavier, more complex. The weight of knowing that what she'd done was irreversible, that lives would never be the same, that justice sometimes looked less like triumph and more like necessary devastation. "That's one," Preacher said quietly. "How many more?" As if in answer, the television cut to another angle. 3 more hospital administrators were being escorted out in handcuffs. The chief financial officer, the director of research operations, and the head of the hospital's ethics committee. The ethics committee director. The irony was almost unbearable. By 10:30 a.m., reporters had pieced together enough information to start naming names, detailing charges, connecting dots. The story was spreading fast. Local news, then regional, then national cable networks picking it up. "Nurse exposes systematic medical experimentation at major hospital," read the CNN Chiron. "Federal raid underway, multiple arrests made." Sarah's phone, which had been mercifully quiet in the safe house's poor reception, suddenly started buzzing with notifications as texts and calls that had been queued began flooding through. Reporters, lawyers, former co-workers, her sister in Portland. Diesel took the phone gently. "Let us screen these. You don't need to deal with this right now." But Sarah couldn't look away from the television. At 11:04 a.m., Agent Rachel Tomas appeared on screen, standing outside St. Helena's main entrance with the hospital's facade visible behind her. She was flanked by officials from the FBI and HHS-OIG. Rachel's voice was steady, professional. "This morning, federal agents executed warrants at St. Helena Medical Center as part of an ongoing investigation into allegations of medical experimentation on non-consenting patients, healthcare fraud, and falsification of government documents. We have made 4 arrests so far, including the hospital's chief medical officer. We have seized extensive documentation and electronic records. This investigation is active and ongoing. We expect additional charges and arrests in the coming days." A reporter shouted, "Can you confirm the number of victims?" Rachel's expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. "We are currently working to identify and notify families of patients who may have been affected. Out of respect for those families, I cannot provide specific numbers at this time, but I can say this: the scale of what occurred at this facility is significant and disturbing." Another reporter, "Is it true a nurse discovered this and brought the evidence to federal authorities?" A healthcare worker with first-hand knowledge of these activities did come forward with credible evidence, Rachel confirmed. "That person showed extraordinary courage in exposing what was happening. Their actions likely saved lives and prevented further abuse. Sarah felt Wraith's hand on her shoulder. Solid. Grounding. The press conference continued for another 10 minutes, with Rachel carefully navigating questions without revealing details that might compromise the investigation. When it ended, the news networks immediately pivoted to expert panels, medical ethicists, former federal prosecutors, patient advocacy groups, all dissecting what this meant, what it revealed about oversight failures, what protections existed for vulnerable patients. By noon, the story dominated national news cycles. By 1 p.m., the State Medical Board announced they were launching their own investigation. By 2 p.m., 2 pharmaceutical companies named in the federal warrants released statements denying any knowledge of improper testing protocols. By 3 p.m., Sarah's name was public. She'd known it would happen eventually. Whistleblowers rarely stayed anonymous once cases went to trial, but seeing her name on television, Sarah Brennan, 31-year-old registered nurse at St. Helena Medical Center, seeing her staff photo from the hospital's website displayed on CNN, seeing reporters standing outside her apartment building interviewing neighbors, made it real in a way she hadn't anticipated. "They found my apartment," Sarah said, watching footage of a reporter knocking on her door. "Doesn't matter," Cowboy said. "You're not going back there. Not until this settles." "When will it settle?" "Months, maybe years. Cases like this take time." Sarah felt exhausted suddenly. Not physically tired, and something deeper, soul-tired. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying too much weight for too long and finally setting it down, only to discover that the relief was somehow more overwhelming than the burden had been. Diesel appeared with food, sandwiches, soup, coffee. "You need to eat." Sarah tried. The food tasted like nothing. She forced herself to finish half a sandwich just to stop Diesel from hovering. At 4:47 p.m., Rachel called Wraith directly. He put it on speaker so Sarah could hear. "We found them," Rachel said without preamble. "The remains. 12 bodies in the basement research facility. Cremated, stored in unmarked containers, labeled only with case numbers. We're working with forensic teams to identify them and match them to your documentation." Sarah closed her eyes. 12. Not all 27, but 12. 12 people who died and been literally stored like specimens. "What about the others?" Sarah asked. "We're tracking down records for the remaining patients. Some may have been transferred to other facilities before their deaths. Some may have been buried under false identities. This is going to take time to unravel completely. And the 4 patients still alive, transferred this afternoon to federal medical facilities with full oversight. They're safe. Their families have been contacted. Turns out 2 of them did have distant relatives who'd lost touch with the hospital. They're being reunited as we speak." Sarah felt tears burning. 2 of them had families, people who cared, who'd been told lies, kept in the dark, prevented from seeing their loved ones. "There's something else," Rachel continued. "Based on your evidence and what we've found today, we've opened preliminary investigations into 3 other hospitals in neighboring states. There's evidence Hollis was consulting for them, possibly replicating this program elsewhere. The weight of that settled over everyone in the room. This wasn't isolated. This was systematic." "How many more?" Sarah whispered. "We don't know yet." "But Sarah?" Rachel's voice softened. "What you did today, you didn't just expose one hospital. You cracked open something much bigger, and that matters. It matters more than you can probably understand right now." Adisum. After the call ended, Sarah walked outside. The October air had turned colder as afternoon gave way to evening. The sun was setting through the pine trees, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. Wraith followed her out. They stood in silence for a while, watching light fade from the sky. "You okay?" he finally asked. "No," Sarah said honestly. "I don't think I'll be okay for a long time, but I think I did the right thing. I think Eleanor would be proud. I think the others, wherever they are, would be proud. I know they would. What happens now?" Now the legal process grinds forward. Grand jury testimony, indictments, arraignments, eventually trials. You'll be at the center of it. It's going to be hard, brutal probably. Defense attorneys will try to discredit you. They'll dig into your past, question your motives, paint you as disgruntled or unstable or vindictive. I know, but you won't face it alone. We'll be there. Every hearing, every deposition, every court appearance, you'll walk in surrounded by leather and steel, and everyone in that courthouse will know you've got family backing you. Sarah looked at him. Why? Why do all this for me? Because you kept a promise when nobody was watching. Because you did the right thing when it cost you everything. Because that's the kind of person worth protecting. Wraith paused. And because Tommy's awake. He's talking. He's going to make a full recovery. And that's because of you. So when you ask why we're doing this, it's because we pay our debts. It's because loyalty runs both ways. It's because you're one of us now, whether you wear a patch or not. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Not peace, not closure, but something close. A sense that maybe, just maybe, she could survive what came next. Inside, the television droned on. More analysis, more expert commentary, more footage of federal agents carrying boxes out of St. Helena Medical Center. Sarah Brennan's face appeared on screen again. Her staff photo, her name, her story. She was no longer anonymous, no longer invisible, no longer just another nurse working night shifts and keeping quiet. She was the woman who'd said no. The woman who'd chosen truth over safety. The woman who'd kept a promise to a dying patient nobody else remembered. And tomorrow she'd begin the long, brutal process of making sure that promise meant something permanent. But tonight, she stood in the cold October air, surrounded by family she'd never expected to find, and let herself believe that maybe justice was possible after all. The weeks that followed the raid moved with strange asymmetry. Long stretches of waiting punctuated by sudden, intense bursts of activity. Sarah stayed at the safe house under Iron Sun's protection while federal investigators built their case. Rachel visited regularly with updates, documents to review, questions that needed answering. The media coverage never stopped. Sarah's face was everywhere. Some outlets portrayed her as a hero. Others questioned her credibility, dug into her past, found a disciplinary note from nursing school about a late assignment and tried to spin it into a pattern of irresponsibility. Defense attorneys leaked suggestions that Sarah had been fired from a previous hospital, a complete fabrication, but the retraction came 3 days later and got a fraction of the attention. Don't read the comments, Diesel warned her repeatedly. Don't Google yourself, don't engage. But Sarah couldn't help it. Late at night, unable to sleep, she'd scroll through news articles on her phone. Most comments were supportive. Some were vicious. A few were threatening enough that Wraith reported them to Rachel, who passed them to the FBI's Threat Assessment Unit. 3 weeks after the raid, Rachel called with news. Grand jury is scheduled for Tuesday, November 10th. You'll testify. Bring everything you've got. Facts, documentation, personal observations. The prosecution wants this airtight. The Iron Sons mobilized immediately. 6 members took vacation days from their jobs to accompany Sarah to the federal courthouse. Others rode in from neighboring states just to be there, to form a visible wall of support on the courthouse steps. Tuesday morning arrived cold and bright. Sarah dressed in borrowed clothes, professional but not expensive, understated but dignified. Diesel had helped her pick the outfit. "You want to look like what you are," Diesel had said. "A working nurse who did her job." The ride to the courthouse took 40 minutes. Wraith drove his bike with Sarah on the back, while 5 other Iron Sons formed an escort. When they pulled into the courthouse parking area, Sarah saw news vans already lining the street, cameras positioned on the steps, reporters waiting. "Ready?" Wraith asked as he killed the engine. "No," Sarah admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." They dismounted. The 6 Iron Sons formed a loose circle around Sarah as they walked toward the courthouse entrance. Cameras tracked their movement. Reporters shouted questions. Ms. Brennan, how does it feel to be responsible for exposing the scandal? Ms. Brennan, do you fear retaliation from the hospital? Ms. Brennan, some people are calling you a hero. How do you respond? Sarah kept her eyes forward, didn't answer. The Iron Sun's presence made the reporters keep their distance. Nobody wanted to physically push past 6 large men in motorcycle vests. Inside, the courthouse was all marble and echoing footsteps. U.S. Marshals met them at security, expedited Sarah through the screening process. The Iron Suns had to wait in the public seating area. Only witnesses and attorneys were allowed in the grand jury room itself. Rachel met Sarah in a small conference room outside the grand jury chamber. She looked tired but focused. You'll be in there approximately 2 to 3 hours, Rachel explained. 23 grand jurors. They'll hear your testimony, review evidence, and vote on whether to issue indictments. The standard is probable cause. Much lower bar than conviction, but still important. Tell the truth. Answer questions directly. Don't speculate about things you don't know firsthand. What if they don't believe me? They will. Your evidence is solid. Your testimony is consistent with physical findings from the raid. And Sarah, Rachel met her eyes. You're credible. You're sympathetic. You're exactly what a jury needs to see to understand that what happened at St. Helena wasn't abstract policy failure. It was real people suffering real harm. At 9:47 a.m., Sarah entered the grand jury room. It was smaller than she'd imagined. The 23 jurors sat in tiered seating, faces attentive, notebooks open. The prosecutor, a woman in her 50s named Claudia Morrison, stood beside a presentation screen. Rachel sat at a small table off to one side. Ms. Brennan, Claudia began. Thank you for being here. Please state your name and occupation for the record. Sarah Elizabeth Brennan. I'm a registered nurse. I was employed at St. Helena Medical Center from March 2022 until October 2025. Can you tell us what brought you here today? Sarah took a breath. Then she told Eleanor's story. She described the 72-year-old woman with lung cancer who'd asked her to water plants. She described Eleanor's death, the missing body, the falsified discharge records. She described her growing suspicion, her decision to investigate what she found. The grand jurors listened in absolute silence. Claudia walked Sarah through the evidence methodically. Patient names, medical charts, medication logs showing experimental drugs not approved for terminal care, consent forms with forged signatures. Sarah pointed out discrepancies in handwriting, dates that didn't match patient admission records, signatures from patients who'd been cognitively impaired or unconscious when the forms were supposedly signed. How did you access these files? One juror asked. I used my hospital credentials to access the patient database. I had legitimate access as their attending nurse. But I also found physical files in a storage room in the restricted wing on the 4th floor. That door was supposed to be locked, but it wasn't. I went in during a night shift when the floor was understaffed. Did you break any laws accessing these files? Sarah paused. Rachel had prepared her for this question. I may have violated hospital policy, but I didn't hack computers or forge credentials. I used access I legitimately had as a healthcare provider. Claudia brought up financial records next. Can you explain what we're looking at here? Wire transfers from 3 pharmaceutical companies to offshore accounts. The account numbers match routing information found in Dr. Hollis's personal email correspondence, which was part of the files I copied. Total transfers over 18 months, $4.2 million. And what were these payments for? Access to terminal patients for experimental drug testing. The pharmaceutical companies wanted human trial data without going through formal FDA approval processes. St. Helena provided the subjects, patients with no family, no advocates, people who wouldn't be missed. Hollis coordinated everything. Another juror. How can you be certain these patients didn't consent? Sarah pulled out a specific file. This is Margaret Chen, 68 years old, admitted June 2024 with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Her chart shows advanced dementia. She couldn't remember her own name, couldn't feed herself, required full-time care. The consent form for experimental treatment is dated 3 weeks after admission and signed with a clear, steady signature. But her medical notes show she was non-verbal by that point. She couldn't have signed anything. The room remained silent. "This is James Rodriguez," Sarah continued, pulling another file. 73, end-stage COPD. His consent form is dated 2 days after his death. Someone forged his signature after he was already dead to justify the experimental medications he'd been given. She saw several jurors write notes urgently. For 3 hours, Sarah walked them through case after case. 27 patients, 27 lives treated as disposable, 27 people who'd trusted the hospital to care for them, who died alone while being used for profit. When she finished, Claudia asked one final question. "Miss Brennan, why did you come forward? You knew it would cost you your job, your career, possibly your safety. Why not just walk away?" Sarah thought about Eleanor's plants, about the promise she'd made, about standing in that hospital room after Eleanor died, realizing that nobody would claim the body, nobody would mourn, nobody would remember. "Because I took an oath," Sarah said quietly, "to do no harm, to protect my patients. And watching people be experimented on without consent, watching their deaths be covered up, watching them disappear like they never mattered, that's harm. That's the opposite of everything I promised to be as a nurse. I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent, so I didn't." The grand jury voted 47 minutes later. Indictments issued for Dr. Marcus Hollis, 3 hospital administrators and 2 pharmaceutical company executives, conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, unlawful human experimentation, falsification of government documents, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. 27 counts each. Sarah learned the news in the conference room where Rachel and Claudia were waiting. "You did it," Rachel said simply. "They voted to indict on all charges." Sarah felt her legs go weak. She sat down heavily. "What happens now?" "Arraignments within 48 hours. Defendants will be formally charged. Enter pleas. Bail will be set. Then pre-trial motions, discovery, probably 12 to 18 months before trial. And me? You'll likely testify at trial. Multiple trials, actually. We're pursuing separate cases for each defendant. Your testimony will be crucial." Rachel paused. "This is going to take years, Sarah. It's going to be exhausting. But you've already done the hardest part." Outside, the Iron Sons were waiting. When Sarah emerged from the courthouse, Wraith stood immediately. He read the answer on her face before she spoke. "They indicted all of them," Sarah said. Preacher let out a breath. Diesel smiled. The others nodded with satisfaction. Wraith pulled Sarah into a brief, tight hug. "Proud of you." They walked down the courthouse steps together. Reporters surged forward again, but this time Sarah paused. "I'll make a statement," she said quietly. Wraith raised an eyebrow but nodded. He and the others formed a protective semicircle while Sarah faced the cameras. "My name is Sarah Brennan. Today, a federal grand jury issued indictments against individuals who used vulnerable patients as human test subjects without consent. 27 people died or suffered because of what happened at St. Helena Medical Center. 27 people who deserve dignity, care, and respect. I hope today's indictments send a message that patients are not disposable, that vulnerable people matter, and that healthcare workers have a duty to speak up when they see abuse. That's all I have to say." She turned and walked away before reporters could ask follow-up questions. That evening, back at the safe house, Sarah watched the news coverage. Her statement played on every network. Legal experts analyzed the indictments. Medical ethicists discussed implications for hospital oversight. But what stuck with Sarah was a segment that aired on the local news. A woman in her 70s appeared on camera, tears streaming down her face. "Margaret Chen was my sister," the woman said. "I lost touch with her when she got sick, The hospital told me she'd been transferred to hospice, but they wouldn't tell me where. I thought she'd died alone and I'd failed her. Today, I learned what really happened. Today, I learned someone fought for her. Someone remembered her. The woman looked directly at the camera. Thank you, Sarah Brennan. Thank you for making sure my sister mattered. Sarah watched through tears. Diesel sat beside her, hand on her shoulder. You gave her closure, Diesel said softly. You gave all their families closure. That's worth everything you've been through. Maybe it was. Sarah wanted to believe that, but mostly she felt tired. Bone deep, soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying weight for so long that even relief felt heavy. Get some sleep, Wraith said. Tomorrow we figure out next steps. But tonight you rest. You earned it. Sarah nodded. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the small bunk bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Eleanor, about Margaret Chen's sister, about the long road still ahead. Justice, she was learning, wasn't a single moment. It wasn't a courtroom victory or a guilty verdict. It was a process, slow, grinding, exhausting, a series of small steps that might, eventually, add up to something meaningful. She'd taken the first steps, the hardest steps. Now, she had to keep walking. 3 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media requests, and the slow rebuilding of a life Sarah barely recognized. Dr. Marcus Hollis's trial was scheduled for March 2026. The hospital administrators would be tried separately, their cases staggered throughout the following year. The pharmaceutical executives had already begun negotiating plea deals, hoping to avoid the full weight of federal conspiracy charges. Sarah stayed at the safe house through November, then moved to a small apartment the Iron Sons helped her find in a neighboring county. Not hiding exactly, but maintaining distance from the circus that St. Helena had become. The hospital was under federal monitoring, its entire administrative structure replaced, its ethics protocols being rewritten from scratch. Sarah's nursing license remained active. The state board had investigated and found no wrongdoing on her part. But she couldn't bring herself to go back to clinical work, not yet, maybe not ever. The idea of walking into a hospital, of putting on scrubs and starting an IV, felt impossible. She'd saved lives in those halls. She'd also watched people die while the institution around her profited from their suffering. In December, Rachel called with unexpected news. Hollis wants to make a deal, Rachel said. He'll plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony against the pharmaceutical companies. It would mean a shorter sentence, maybe 12 to 15 years instead of 25. Sarah felt cold rage bloom in her chest. He wants a deal? After what he did? I know. But here's the thing. His testimony could bring down the pharmaceutical executives and expose similar programs at other hospitals. It could lead to systemic reform. The U.S. Attorney wants my opinion, and I'm asking for yours. What do you think I should say? I think you should say whatever feels right to you. This is your case as much as it's anyone's. Those were your patients, your discovery, your courage that got us here. Sarah sat in her small apartment, looking out the window at December snow falling softly. She thought about Eleanor, about Margaret Chen, about the 25 others whose families were still being notified, still learning the truth, still processing unimaginable betrayal. Will the families be consulted? Sarah asked. Yes. Anyone who can be located will have the opportunity to provide victim impact statements and weigh in on the plea deal. Then I'll wait to hear what they say. If they want Hollis to serve maximum time, I'll support that. If they want his testimony to prevent this from happening elsewhere, I'll support that too. It's not my forgiveness to give. Rachel was quiet for a moment. That's a good answer, Sarah. A wise answer. I don't feel wise. I feel exhausted. I know, but you're doing remarkable things with that exhaustion. They talked for a few more minutes, then ended the call. Sarah sat in the silence of her apartment, snow falling outside, the weight of decisions she'd never wanted to make pressing down on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. A text from Wraith. Clubhouse tonight. We're doing a thing. 7 p.m. Be there. Sarah almost declined. She was tired. She wanted to be alone. But something in the message's simplicity made her reconsider. The Iron Sons didn't demand. They invited. They suggested. They showed up and let you choose whether to show up too. She texted back, "I'll be there." At 6:45 p.m., Wraith picked her up on his bike. The ride to the clubhouse was cold, the December air biting through her jacket, but there was something cleansing about it. The speed, the noise, the way it forced every thought out of her head, except the immediate present. When they arrived, the clubhouse parking lot was full. More bikes than Sarah had ever seen there before. Easily 40, maybe 50. Riders from chapters across the state, maybe beyond. "What's going on?" Sarah asked as they dismounted. "You'll see," Wraith said. Inside, the clubhouse was warm and crowded. Iron Sons members filled every available space. Some Sarah recognized, many she didn't. They turned when she entered, and the room fell silent. Cowboy stood at the front, beside something covered with a tarp. He struck his gavel against the bar. "Brothers and sisters," Cowboy began. 3 months ago, a woman came to us asking for help. She'd done something dangerous. Something right. Something that cost her everything. We voted to protect her. We voted to stand with her. We voted to help her fight." He looked at Sarah. "Sarah Brennan, you're not a biker. You don't ride. You didn't grow up in this world. But you've got something that matters more than leather or chrome. You've got integrity. You've got courage. You've got the kind of loyalty that makes you risk everything to keep a promise to someone who can't repay you." A cowboy pulled the tarp off the object beside him. It was a leather vest, black, well-made, with Iron Sons patches sewn carefully onto the back. But instead of a chapter name, the rocker at the bottom read, "Honorary Member." "We don't do this often," Cowboy continued. "In 40 years, we've given honorary membership to maybe 6 people. Lawyers who've represented us pro bono. A judge who treated us fairly when nobody else would. A paramedic who saved one of our brothers when everyone else had given up." He picked up the vest. "Sarah Brennan, you saved Tommy Reeves's life. You exposed corruption that could have killed dozens more. You stood up when it cost you everything. You kept a promise when nobody was watching." He held out the vest. "We'd be honored if you'd wear this, if you'd let us call you family, if you'd let us stand with you for whatever comes next." Sarah's throat closed. She couldn't speak. Tears blurred her vision as she stepped forward and let Cowboy drape the vest over her shoulders. It fit perfectly. The room erupted in applause. Hands pounding tables, voices raised in approval. Sarah felt Diesel hug her from one side, Wraith grip her shoulder from the other. She'd lost her job, her career, her anonymity, her old life. But she'd gained this. A family that chose her, a purpose that mattered. A community that valued the same things she did: loyalty, truth, protection of the vulnerable. "Speech!" someone called out. Sarah wiped her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," Cowboy said gently. "Just know we've got your back, now and always." The gathering lasted hours. People shared stories, told jokes, toasted with whiskey and beer. A woman from a neighboring chapter approached Sarah around 9 p.m. "My name's Angela," she said. "I'm a social worker. When I heard what you did, I wanted to meet you. I've seen cases like yours, whistleblowers who expose abuse and then get destroyed by retaliation. Most of them end up alone, broke and broken. But you've got this family backing you. That changes everything." "I got lucky," Sarah said. "No," Angela corrected. "You made choices that earned you this. There's a difference." She paused. "I work with a non-profit that supports healthcare whistleblowers. We provide legal assistance, mental health resources, financial aid. We'd like to feature your story, with your permission, to show other healthcare workers that speaking up doesn't mean facing it alone." Sarah considered. Would it help people? Absolutely. Every year, Hundreds of healthcare workers see abuse, fraud, or malpractice and stay silent because they're terrified of retaliation. Your story shows them there's another path. Then yes, I'll help however I can. Angela smiled. Thank you. I think you're going to change a lot of lives, Sarah. Not just the patients at St. Helena, but every healthcare worker who sees something wrong and needs courage to act. As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself outside with Wraith, looking at the December stars. You doing okay? He asked. I think so. Some days are harder than others, but I'm not falling apart. That's something. It's more than something. Wraith pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages. You know how many people have contacted us asking how to support you, how to help. We've gotten donations totaling $47,000 from people who heard your story and want to make sure you stay financially stable while the trials proceed. Sarah's breath caught. What? People care, Sarah. They see what you did and they want to help. We set up a fund, completely transparent, independently managed, to support your living expenses until you figure out your next move. I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's community support. It's people recognizing that doing the right thing shouldn't bankrupt you. Let them help. Let us help. Sarah nodded slowly. Pride warred with practical necessity. She had savings, but they were dwindling. The legal proceedings meant she couldn't work steady employment. The media attention meant she couldn't exactly job hunt without scrutiny. Okay, she said finally. Thank you. Don't thank us. Thank the 263 people who donated. They're the ones who believe in you. February brought the first trial. Not Hollis. His plea negotiations dragged on. But one of the hospital administrators, the director of research operations. Sarah testified for 2 days, walking the jury through evidence, answering defense attorneys' aggressive questions, maintaining composure even when they implied she was motivated by attention-seeking or financial gain. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts, 15 years in federal prison. March brought Hollis's plea deal. After extensive consultation with victims' families, the U.S. attorney accepted his guilty plea on reduced charges. 12 years in federal prison, permanent revocation of his medical license, forfeiture of all assets tied to the wire fraud, and most importantly, his testimony against the pharmaceutical companies that had funded the experiments. That testimony led to indictments of 4 executives at 3 different pharmaceutical companies. It revealed that St. Helena hadn't been an isolated case. Similar programs had been operating at 5 other hospitals across 3 states. Federal investigations opened at all of them. Sarah watched the dominoes fall, one after another, realizing that what she'd exposed wasn't just individual corruption, but systemic rot, a network of exploitation that treated vulnerable patients as commodities. In April, Eleanor Voss's memorial service was held at a small chapel outside the city. Margaret Chen's sister organized it, inviting families of the other victims. 43 people attended. Siblings, nieces, nephews, old friends who'd lost touch but never forgotten. Sarah spoke briefly. Eleanor asked me to water her plants. It was a small request, a simple promise, but it meant everything because it meant she trusted me. She trusted that even when she was gone, someone would remember. Someone would care. I couldn't water her plants. They were disposed of when she died. But I could keep a different promise. I could make sure she wasn't forgotten. I could make sure what happened to her mattered. After the service, families approached Sarah one by one. Some thanked her, some cried, some simply held her hands, unable to speak. Margaret Chen's sister, whose testimony had appeared on the news months earlier, hugged Sarah tightly. My sister's death has meaning now, she whispered. Because of you, it has meaning. May brought an unexpected opportunity. A documentary filmmaker contacted Sarah through Rachel, requesting permission to tell her story. The filmmaker had spent 2 decades covering whistleblowers, exposing institutional corruption, giving voice to people who'd risked everything for truth. I want to do this right, the filmmaker said when they met. I want to honor Eleanor's memory and the others. I want to show what courage looks like, what systemic failure looks like, and what justice, real justice, requires." Sarah agreed, with conditions. Any profits from the documentary would go to organizations supporting healthcare whistleblowers and patient advocacy groups. The victims' families would have approval over how their loved ones were portrayed, and the story would focus on the patients, not on Sarah as a hero. "This isn't about me," Sarah insisted. "It's about 27 people who deserve better." By June, Sarah had settled into a new rhythm. She worked part-time as a consultant for the non-profit Angela had introduced her to, reviewing cases from healthcare workers who'd witnessed abuse and needed guidance on how to report it safely. She testified at the remaining trials as they proceeded through the court system. She participated in interviews and panels about patient rights and whistleblower protections. And she rode with the Iron Sons. Not on her own bike, she still hadn't learned to ride, but on the back of Wraith's Harley, joining weekend trips, attending charity events, showing up when one of their own needed support. She wore the honorary member vest proudly. One Saturday in late June, the Iron Sons organized a memorial ride for the victims of St. Helena. 72 riders participated, traveling from the hospital to the cemetery where Eleanor and 5 others had been buried. At the cemetery, they placed flowers on each grave, stood in silence for 5 minutes, then rode on. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't covered by news cameras. It was simply a community honoring the dead, keeping promises, showing up. That, Sarah had learned, was what mattered most. Not grand gestures or viral moments, but consistent presence. Showing up, staying, remembering. In September, nearly a year after Sarah had run from St. Helena with a flash drive in her pocket, the last trial concluded. All defendants had been convicted or had pled guilty. Sentences ranged from 8 to 18 years. The pharmaceutical companies paid $247 million in combined fines and settlements, money that would fund patient advocacy programs and improved oversight systems. The hospital itself had been restructured top to bottom, new administrators hired, new ethics protocols implemented, federal monitors embedded in every department. It wasn't perfect. It didn't bring back the dead. It didn't erase the trauma. But it was something. It was accountability. It was change. That evening, Sarah sat in the clubhouse surrounded by Iron Son's family, watching the sun set through the windows. "What now?" Diesel asked. "All the trials are done. What's next for you?" Sarah thought about it. She'd spent a year fighting, testifying, surviving. She'd rebuilt her life from scratch. She'd found family she never knew she needed. She'd kept a promise to a dying woman, and in the process had changed healthcare oversight across multiple states. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "I keep doing this. I keep helping people who see things they shouldn't. I keep making sure vulnerable patients have advocates. I keep showing up." She looked around at the faces watching her. "With all of you, if you'll have me." Wraith smiled. "We'll have you. Always." Cowboy raised his glass. "To Sarah Brennan, to promises kept, to family chosen. To fights worth fighting." Everyone raised their glasses. "To Sarah." Later, as people filtered out and the clubhouse grew quiet, Sarah stood outside under the stars. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Final sentencing complete. It's over. You won." Sarah stared at the words. Had she won? 27 people were still dead. Eleanor was still gone. Sarah's old life was still destroyed, but systemic changes had been made. Oversight had improved. Other hospitals were implementing new protocols. Healthcare workers across the country were speaking up more, empowered by her example. Maybe that was what winning looked like. Not perfect restoration, but meaningful change. Not erasure of harm, but prevention of future harm. She texted back, "Thank you for everything." Rachel replied immediately, "Thank you. What you did mattered. It will keep mattering." Sarah put her phone away and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, she liked to imagine Eleanor looking down, seeing what her simple request had set in motion. I kept my promise, Sarah whispered to the night. I watered your plants, in the only way that mattered. Behind her, Wraith appeared in the doorway. You coming back inside? In a minute. Take your time. We'll be here when you're ready. That, Sarah thought, was the most important promise of all, not grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Just the steady certainty that people would be there. That family, chosen family, meant showing up, staying, remembering. She'd found that. After losing everything, she'd found that, and it was enough. Thank you for watching Sarah's journey. If her courage inspired you, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this. Stories about ordinary people who do extraordinary things when nobody's watching. Stories about promises kept and families chosen. Stories that matter because they're true. We'll keep telling them because the world needs to hear them. See you in the next one. The end.